Hey guys, Pat from Primate Objective here. Just want to do a quick video on this guy, Donald Prothero, and he's a so-called Bigfoot skeptic. And I came across a video of him doing a presentation for the Center for Inquiry, where he tries to make the open and shut case that Bigfoot doesn't exist and tries to explain the phenomenon. Um, and let's just say I didn't find it very compelling at all. And in fact, he brings a lot of mistruths and inaccurate facts to the table to do so, while being very arrogant and ridiculing the Bigfoot community, I suppose, or the phenomenon itself. And so I wanted to call him out on just a few things. So he starts the presentation with a high school explanation of what science is, which I tend to agree with. Um, a method of understanding the natural world around us. Sure. Science is science. And I don't expect any scientist, to go in front of the news cameras anytime soon, waving a piece of paper that says Bigfoot is real, based on where we're at now. I understand that, but I agree with this guy. How science works, but I must say I find him to be a very close-minded individual. So I kind of have to question how good of a scientist he actually is, because science thrives. It only lives with a willingness to explore new ideas, and this guy doesn't seem very willing to explore a new idea or even sit down and have an honest discussion about a new idea. So, in the presentation, he goes on to point out that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I agree with that. He also makes the point special pleading. Um, trying explaining the phenomenon supernaturally or aliens and things like that. That's not an explanation, and I agree with him on that as well. You can't explain something with a non-explanation, if it's aliens or whatever. That's what we don't know anything about aliens, so that's not an explanation. Um, and then he goes on to talk about science versus pseudoscience, and a lot of this I agree with too. Peer review is important. Um, uh, being wrong about your theories and recognizing that is all important. This is how science works. Now, we start getting into some weird stuff here, and this is where he starts going off the rails when he's talking about weeding out bad data, and these points that he's making here. Most accounts are too vague or too old to be taken seriously. That's simply just not true. Many sightings are admitted hoaxes. Now that's quite a statement to make. Many sightings are admitted hoaxes, and that's just not true. There have been very few um, eyewitness accounts that people have since come forth and said, "Well, I was just lying." Um, that just doesn't happen. Uh, and many sightings give widely discrepant versions of the cryptid, yet they're assumed to describe the same creature. No, that's not true. And again, I'm only talking about the North American Bigfoot here. They're pretty much described the same way. A large, hairy, 8-foot tall, 800-pound, 4-foot wide creature walking upright on two legs. That is in all the accounts. Sometimes, yes, you get small variations, hair color, maybe a foot shorter, and there are others because there have been juvenile sightings. But when you're talking about an adult Sasquatch or Bigfoot, they are described almost exactly the same, minus, like I said, hair color, facial features. There are some variations. So this is where he's starting to go wrong. This is where the truth is not being represented very well at all. Now he gets into standards of evidence. Best possible evidence, of course, a body, a specimen, basically, and that is true. And he talks about videos and sounds. He says easily faked, but often difficult to tell what they show. That is true, but easily faked, not really. I guess if it's a blob squatch, it's easy to fake. But there are a lot of compelling videos and photographs that would not be easily faked. It would be quite a task to fake them. And what he says is crummy evidence, or footprints, very easily faked and commonly hoaxed. That could not be more inaccurate. Tracks are not easily faked. And because of their sheer volume. And they're not commonly hoaxed. I guess this guy wants to blame Ray Wallace from 50 years ago, one guy, for every track that people have found since. And even up to this day, people are still finding tracks from New York to Northern California, from Alaska to Georgia. People find tracks, and it's not Ray Wallace, who's dead, doing all this. That's an absurd claim, especially for a scientist. And then this, I'm going to get to probably at the end of the video. Not evidence, eyewitness accounts. Now I agree, eyewitness accounts are not evidence. This is true. But there is a place for them, okay? And so let's get to the... he talks about territory, okay? And the claim he's making, basically, much of the wild was unexplored a century ago, but it's all been explored today, and that's simply not true. He talks about the pressures of 7 billion people, and there's only about, well, I don't know, 500 million people living in North America. And then goes on to say that we've cut down every tree in North America, therefore there's no place for a Bigfoot to hide. And this is, again, just doesn't match reality. He points out the clear cutting that does go on in the Pacific Northwest. That is accurate, and you can go on Google Earth right now, and it's not hard to find hillsides that have been clear cut. They're there. But what you see also is new growth. They do grow back, and they're relatively small little areas compared to the millions of trees that surround them. And so, like, if you look at this picture here of North America, This is a picture of North America 1,000 years ago. Well, it's not. It's a modern day picture, but it might as well be from 1,000 years ago. Because this is what North America looked like then, and this is what it looks like now, except for a few little specks of concrete dust that got on the image. You can barely make out Chicago and New York in this picture. In fact, most people probably can't even do that. So, the habitat for a Bigfoot has not been destroyed. I mean, we do have deer, we do have bears, and they do have habitat to live in. I think a Sasquatch would as well. So it's just a complete misrepresentation of reality going on here. Now, of course, he's got to touch on the Patterson Gimlin film. And this is where he just couldn't get it more wrong. First, he makes the claim that it was widely considered a hoax by experts who examined it. What experts? What experts? I haven't heard any expert really debunk it. I mean, are you talking about Hollywood special effects? Since you're making the claim it's a guy in a suit? Or as he says, someone in a rug? It's so obvious, right? There are actually some Hollywood experts who have confirmed it to not be a person in a suit. I guess whoever was in that suit, had to have a nice broken arm to give their elbow a different location to be in. And of course, he says the gait is clearly modern human, not that of an ape. Nope, you're wrong, sir. The gait that Patty walks with in that footage is not human whatsoever. She never fully extends her leg as she's walking forward. And that is not natural for a human to do. In fact, it's extremely difficult to replicate. Although it can be, it's very hard to do so. The stride is long, and the gait looks funny. It doesn't look like a human walking whatsoever. And then he goes on to say that Patterson and Gimlin were hustlers and pranksters. And that's not true. I mean, you can question the character of Patterson for sure, but not Gimlin. Gimlin was never known to be a hustler or a prankster. I don't even think hustler is the right word to use for Patterson. Bob Gimlin's a good man. He was then, he is now. And then he goes on to say they conveniently got perfect footage on their first day. Inaccurate. Again, if you're gonna criticize the Bigfoot phenomenon, do it, at least bring truth to the table to do so. Why would you have to lie or misrepresent the facts? Patterson and Gimlin were out in the woods for 2.5 weeks before they got that footage. Riding around on horseback for that long. It wasn't on the first day. It was 2 weeks. And then they damn near got killed trying to get out of there from mudslides. So again, inaccurate. And then he goes back to the gate and tries to make this absurd conclusion that a little known account from 12 years before, okay, by a guy named William Rowe, where the eyewitness account described the gait that Patty walks with in the film. He tries to say that that was the script used to walk funny. And that's just, again, how do you come to that conclusion? That's a bit of a stretch. To me, it's the compelling the compelling thing about that is that what they filmed matched an eyewitness account, and by the way, matches today's eyewitness accounts as well. People report they look like they're gliding or they're cross-country skiing, and you hear that over and over and over again. So if you're going to criticize the Patterson Gimlin film, at least do it honestly, and you haven't done that here in your little presentation, okay? Now, I want to talk about eyewitness accounts, because really, eyewitness accounts they're essentially why we know what we do know about these things. We get almost all of that from eyewitness accounts because we don't have a specimen to study. We don't have good observation points that we can get on these things. And, you know, what he has to say, he brings up, it's very bizarre. He brings up a tragedy that happened in the woods where an irresponsible father with a gun turned around, mistook his son wearing a toboggan for a hog and shot him and killed him. And I don't understand the relevance to that. That has nothing to do with the Bigfoot world. It has nothing to do with the Bigfoot phenomenon. It's just it was a tragedy. I don't know why you're citing it. It's just a very bizarre thing, you know. And then goes on to bring up the DC sniper case. He's trying to make some bizarre point about that too. And someone in the audience was laughing when he did so. I just thought it extremely inappropriate. So from there, basically, he goes on to say that, you know, eyewitness accounts are not, I guess, not to be taken seriously whatsoever, because people misrepresent what they see, what they think they see, which is absurd. And of course, he uses the stupid court of law thing, where eyewitness testimony is part of a larger body of evidence in a court of law. You know, rarely is someone convicted alone on eyewitness testimony. And the one thing that never happens is, you know, yes, Your Honor, it was a bear that robbed the bank. You know, they don't include bears in the lineup. They don't include guys in a clown suit in the lineup, right? So the whole court of law thing is just ridiculous. Here's the thing you need to know, Donald, about eyewitness accounts. They have not shrank over the years. They've actually grown. And the documentation of them has grown as well. There are tens of thousands of eyewitness accounts, and there are thousands and thousands of them that have been published methodically and vetted as best as they could be, given the circumstance. It's an anecdotal account, but given the fact that it is that, they have been methodically looked at, and they have been vetted as best as they can be. There's just one guy, one man, who has published probably around 700 to 800 eyewitness accounts in audio versions of these accounts. Some of them, you know, lasting almost an hour, describing the encounter, which maybe lasted 20 seconds. So very, very in-depth detail. And the one man, Wes Germer, who has published these to the public, has probably talked to 2,000. Just one man talked to 2,000 people who have had eyewitness accounts. Now, are some of those, you know, made up? Of course. Law of probabilities says, of course. If one of them's true, then there's something going on here. but there's a lot of them are very, very compelling. So I think the vast majority of them are probably true, and they're not bears. And that's the other thing I want to talk about with eyewitness accounts is, Donald, you have to understand something, and I challenge you to sit down with even a handful of these people that you pick yourself at random, and just listen to them. Again, not so that you can go, oh my God, we've proved the existence of Bigfoot. Let's just start somewhere other than ridicule and outright dismissal. And if you talk to these people, I think you will find it compelling. You'll learn something. As a scientist, you should want to learn, should you not? you should want to open your mind and at least be willing to listen. And here's the other thing you need to understand. Not only are they happening in greater numbers, and that we know more and more information because people are beginning to come forward because they can stay anonymous, and they feel like they feel compelled to talk about it. Because here's what you don't understand. It's a very, very traumatic experience. Okay? When somebody randomly comes across this very large, intimidating, scary creature in the woods that they didn't know anything about, and it just turns the world upside down. And they usually pee in their pants. They usually think they're going to die. They have night terrors for years and years. Some of them lose relationships. It is a traumatic event. Very traumatic event. And that it does not happen from spotting a bear in the woods. Okay? And that does not happen from a person who foolishly would dress up in some kind of costume and, go boogity-boo, try and scare people in the woods. That's you don't create that kind of trauma, and you certainly can't recreate what's outside of the human range. Human beings are not 8 feet tall, 4 feet wide. There's not one person that's 8 foot tall, 4 feet wide that's ever existed in this world that's been documented as far as a human being. Okay? So that's part of the reason why I'm calling you out, is because you don't need to be so arrogant and condescending when you don't even know what you're talking about. Your facts are all wrong, and it's very, very insulting to a large amount of people. And I don't think you realize that. But I'm here. That's why I'm here, is to call you out on that, so that you do. And sir, you are more than welcome to come on the show with me and Ernie and talk about this in a reasonable manner. I know you said you've been involved in Bigfoot debate, as you called it, and it got heated. And there are some nasty people in the Bigfoot community. I'm not going to lie. Me and Ernie are not one of. We don't fit into that category. We're very reasonable. And if you can convince me, that'd be great. I welcome a reasonable explanation for the Bigfoot phenomenon, because to be honest with you, I don't want them to be real. I'd prefer them to not exist on this planet. And that's really all I can say. I'm not going to go into detail about that, but I welcome the compelling argument that these things are likely not real. I welcome that. So I would love for you to convince me. Like, I'm all ears. But as it stands now, the signs point towards the other way. That probably are out there. But anyway, I just wanted to make that. And let me know, Donald, if you want to come on the show. We'd love to have you. All right, thanks for listening.